quiet town with a dark past, stood an abandoned house at the end of Old Orchard Lane. Known as the Dead House, it had been empty for over a century. Locals whispered that it was cursed, that anyone who set foot inside would either vanish or return with their mind shattered. Children dared each other to enter, but even the bravest wouldn't go near it after sunset. The house had belonged to the Roswell family, a wealthy and reclusive group who mysteriously disappeared one stormy night in 1903. Since then, no one had dared to move in, and the property had become tangled in layers of superstition and eerie rumors. One autumn, a group of college students, Evan, Katie, Jack, and Lily, decided to explore the dead house as part of a Halloween dare. They were all skeptics, excited by the thrill of the unknown and confident that the stories were nothing more than ghost tales to scare children. Armed with flashlights, a few cameras, and their phones, they set out for the house on a foggy October night. As they approached, the house loomed before them, its sagging porch and broken windows resembling hollow eyes and a twisted grin. The air around it felt thick and heavy, carrying a faint, unpleasant smell. Evan led the way, pushing open the rusted gate, and they made their way to the door, which creaked open far too easily, as if it had been expecting them. Inside, the air was stale, filled with dust and the scent of rot. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden floors, and their flashlights cast shadows that seemed to twist and move, almost alive. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, peeling in large chunks to reveal old, rotting wood beneath. The silence was so complete that even the faintest creak felt deafening. They explored the first floor, finding rooms filled with dusty furniture draped in white sheets. Strange symbols were scratched into the walls, and scattered family portraits hung crookedly, each one depicting members of the Roswell family with hollow eyes that seemed to follow them. Every step deeper into the house felt like crossing an invisible boundary, and each of them began to feel a creeping unease. "Let's go upstairs," Jack suggested, breaking the silence. They exchanged glances, each of them feeling the prickling sensation of being watched, but none willing to admit they were scared. They climbed the grand staircase, which groaned under their weight, and found themselves in a long hallway lined with closed doors. Katie stopped in front of one door that seemed different from the others. It was painted a deep red, with scratches covering the handle, as if someone had tried desperately to claw their way out. She hesitated, then turned the handle, pushing the door open. Inside was a small bedroom, with a bed covered in dark, red-stained sheets. A single, grimy window overlooked the backyard, where the twisted branches of an old tree scraped against the glass, casting eerie shadows over the room. She felt a sudden, intense wave of dizziness and leaned against the doorframe, hearing faint whispers in her ear. "Did you hear that?" she asked, but the others shook their heads, looking at her with concern. They moved down the hallway, but each of them began experiencing strange things. Evan felt cold fingers brush against his neck, but when he turned, no one was there. Lily's flashlight flickered, and for a split second, she saw a figure standing at the end of the hall, watching them with hollow eyes. Jack swore he heard footsteps behind them, slow and deliberate, matching their own as if someone, or something, was following. They reached the attic, where they found an old trunk filled with crumbling letters and photographs of the Roswell family. Katie picked up one of the letters and began to read, her voice trembling as she spoke. "To anyone who finds this letter, we have made a terrible mistake. We thought the house would give us everything we desired. It did, but it took something much darker in return." As she finished reading, the door to the attic slammed shut, and they were plunged into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled with their flashlights, but none of them worked. The air grew frigid, and a low, guttural growl echoed through the attic, followed by a scratching sound, like nails dragging across wood. Evan banged on the door, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. A shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the attic, tall and skeletal, its face hidden in shadow, but with gleaming, hollow eyes that radiated malice. The figure stepped forward, and with each step, the room grew darker, as if it were swallowing the very light. Who are you?" Jack stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The figure stopped, tilting its head as though studying him, before it spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves, cold and ancient. "I am what they summoned. I am what the Roswells fed their fear to. And now, you are mine." The figure lunged toward them, and the students screamed, scrambling to escape. Lily managed to wrench the attic door open, and they tumbled down the stairs, their bodies trembling with terror. They ran through the house, the whispers growing louder, each room twisting and shifting, like the house itself was alive, trapping them within. They reached the front door, but it wouldn't open. Evan threw himself against it, feeling the walls close in, as if the house itself were trying to swallow them. Desperately, they turned back, only to find the figure standing at the end of the hallway, its hollow eyes fixed on him, a twisted grin spreading across its face. In a final act of desperation, they shattered a window and climbed through, stumbling into the cold night air, their bodies scraped and bleeding. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of town, collapsing on the sidewalk, gasping for breath. The townsfolk found them the next morning, but when the students tried to explain what had happened, they could only remember fragments. Their minds were hazy, as though the house had stolen the memories. They each carried scars, physical and mental, from that night, and not one of them ever dared to return to Old Orchard Lane. But sometimes, in their nightmares, they would see the figure with hollow eyes, watching them from the end of a dark hallway, waiting, and whispering, come back, feed me your fear." And to this day, the dead house waits at the end of Old Orchard Lane, hungry for its next visitor.
Трава работала, прикопала, ай, сектор по лесу, ой, сектор по лесу.